If you're an AI filmmaker who loves the look coming out of Higgsfield Cinema Studio, but you're a little overwhelmed and don't know how to approach dealing with the different camera bodies, the lenses, and you don't really want to spend the credits to figure it out, that is completely understandable if you don't have a live-action film background. Luckily for you, that is my exact background. I worked as a cinematographer for 10 years. I've worked in person with most of these cameras and lenses, and in this video, I'm going to try to explain what each of these cameras does in the real world, what it does in Higgsfield, and then the same with the lenses. So here we are in Higgsfield Cinema Studio, and I've generated a lot of images to try to figure out and illustrate how the different camera bodies and lenses are working. So if you've never done this before, make sure you're in image mode, and this is the prompt that I put together. But the part we're going to be talking about today is, of course, the camera lens interface. So let's start with the cameras first. So as we scroll through here, it's not ordered in any way that makes sense to me. Exactly. I have my opinions on these cameras based in real-world use, but let's talk about them individually. So I've put together a little Miro board of all the different camera sensors that Higgsfield has available for us. And the two things we want to look at are, one, the size of the sensor, and then two, is it a film or a digital camera? So to start, what I've done is organize this by descending order of sensor size big to sensor size small. And what you need to know if you don't come from live action cinematography is that the bigger the sensor, the more shallow the depth of field can be. There's a little bit more play with lenses and formats and stuff like that, but generally what Higgsfield is going for here is that if you choose IMAX, it has the biggest sensor size, it's going to have the most shallow depth of field. If that's actually implemented accurately, I doubt it. But generally, from what I saw, that's what they're trying to pull off. So we'll just zoom in a little bit. So if you want the most shallow depth of field, you're going to want to choose their IMAX camera. It's based off of 70mm, sensor size 52x70, right? You don't need to actually worry about the dimensions and stuff like that. With Higgsfield, in real life, you would really need to worry about that with lenses and stuff like that. But anyway, next on the sensor size is the Red Raptor, 40x21. A large sensor. It's like kind of a, I guess they're calling it like, it's like a VistaVision sensor. It's kind of like in between because it's a made up digital sensor size. But anyway, it's the next largest. Next, we're getting into the Sony Venice, pretty classic camera these days for Netflix shows and whatnot. It is 36x24 for like open gate. We won't talk about sensor cropping or anything like that. Doesn't really matter in this case. And then the Arri Alexa 35, which is your typical super 35mm or just 35mm film. Sensor size, very, very common throughout the history of filmmaking. This is like the most common sensor size probably of like all movies ever shot. And Arri made a new modern version of it because, again, all the lenses cover it. But again, not relevant here, but this is a super common camera. And I guess if you were trying to make like a standard cinema looking film, what does that even mean? That these two cameras in these days, like most movies and Netflix shows are shot on like these two cameras, like super common, right? This is like very common modern Netflix camera sensor size here. And then we have a funny one that they went and put the Arri SR they wrote, which is a super 16mm camera or 16mm camera with the smallest sensor size, 12x7, right? So this is getting down to like a micro four thirds kind of digital camera sensor size. So that is the order of camera sensors and camera bodies by sensor size big to small, more shallow depth of field, less shallow depth of field. So that's most of the cameras covered. But if you go all the way to the bottom of the Higgsfield website, it says Panavision Millennium DXL2 digital. But they have a picture of a different camera. But it does say digital, so I think I know which one they're talking about, but this should be fixed. This is not quite right. So we're back in Miro, and they definitely mean this, I think, because it said digital. So this is referring to the Panavision Millennium DXL2, which I've shot with like once or twice, and it's using a red Monstro camera sensor in there. But the thing is, that sensor is 40x21, which is the same size basically as the Red Raptor. If they mean the actual digital version of this, there's not a huge difference between these, and I don't know why they would both exist. Now, the graphic that's on the Higgsfield website is the Panavision Millennium XL2, which, is not, sorry, let me delete this. But although it says digital on the Higgsfield website, it's an image of the Panavision Millennium XL2, which is a 35mm film camera, which would be 36x24. So the reason I think they probably mean it's the Millennium XL2 is because there's not a huge difference between these cameras. We look here, Red Raptor and Red Monstro have the same sensor size, and they're both red sensors. So why would both of these exist? I'm not sure. Versus the XL2 here is closer to your 35 millimeter film camera size, right? Like the Venice and close to the Alexa. So if there's two of these, it doesn't make sense because they're both red digital sensors. Whereas in this case, this would make sense to me because this is a traditional film camera that's going to give you a film look with a 35 millimeter sensor size. So that would make sense to me. My guess is that they mean for it to be this, and they should get rid of the DXL2, it's just the XL2, and get rid of the digital sign. But we'll see what they actually mean. So the last thing I want to cover here is that obviously some of these are film cameras, and I think they might be putting some sort of like film grain emulation on it. If it's not obvious to you which ones are which, I will sort them really quickly. But here we are. We have sorted now the film cameras and the digital cameras for the people that are not familiar. IMAX is film, big sensor, super shallow depth of field. If they mean the XL2, not the DXL2, this is a 35 millimeter film camera. Maybe it has some film grain. And then the super 16 millimeter camera, which we'll look at some examples, has kind of a cool look. So this is a less shallow depth of field, kind of more like, super, like really, really retro film look here. Has a big resurgence on YouTube. It's very cool to shoot super 16 millimeter film. Has a certain look to it, certainly. And then on the digital side, again, the Red Raptor digital camera, kind of a VistaVision large sensor. They could have gone Alexa LF too, but anyway. Then we have the Sony Venice and the Alexa. There, I wouldn't say there's a huge difference as far as Higgsfield's concerned, but as far as if we get into the real world color science of these cameras, which I don't think Higgsfield is attempting to replicate too much other than maybe a little color correct going on. Red, Sony, and Arri all have different looks that kind of come from them, but you can color grade them to match, so it's sort of a moot point in the virtual space. But anyway, that might be information overload, but if you're trying to pick a camera, go ahead and pick the IMAX or the Red Raptor if you want really shallow depth of field, and pick a film camera if you want a film look, and pick a digital camera if you want a digital look. How much that actually gets implemented in Higgsfield, it's hard to say, but we'll look at some examples. Okay, so next on the list here is to start looking at all the different lenses, and the best way to do this is to look at some examples, and I'll talk you through what my impressions are of these lenses and how I think Higgsfield did as far as like implementing them on what they look like. So to start this study, we are doing a DXL2, and then I'm going to change out the different lenses. And the first one is a Zeiss Ultra Prime, and I believe that's what this image is here. Yep, DXL2 Zeiss Ultra Prime 24 mil. So in general, the Zeiss Ultra Prime I would still call it a modern cinema lens. Even though it's a little bit old. But what I mean by modern is you're going to get a very clean image and without much color cast. So if something is, basically white in real life, it'll be white through this lens. And I'll talk about other lenses where that is not the case. But Zeiss generally is a very scientific lens. You're going to get very accurate color. It's going to not have very much like chromatic aberration or vignetting. It's going to be a very clean, nice lens. But the Zeiss Ultra Prime is a little bit of an older one, so it might have a more, maybe a softer look overall. Now, what does that mean in Higgsfield? Not a ton. It means that this is a very standard look. Like there's no weird artifacts happening. That's the way that I would take it. And generally that's what's happening here. Now, if I was thinking about the camera back that we used, I would, at a 24 mil, I suppose it makes sense that the background's not that out of focus. But I'm not super happy with this image for what I'm looking generally if I'm using AI, because I can get whatever I want with AI. But anyway, that's the Zeiss Ultra Prime. Moving on, let's look at the JDC XTral Express. Now, I've never actually used this lens. I'm not that familiar with it at all, but what I would say looking at it and looking at this is that it's a bit of a retro lens. And when it comes to AI cinematography, what does a retro lens mean? I would say that there's a little bit more artifacts. And in this case, I would say that they've added some lens flare here. So I think we're here for the XTral Express lens flare. So if you look at this, it's very different than the anamorphic flares. We'll see it was a little bit of a rainbow. And I don't know if I animated this shot, but I think they do a little bit of animation on this type of flare as well. So for the XTral, again, a little bit more of a vintage look. I wouldn't say that that's the vintage part is actually implemented here as far as like the blacks being lifted or anything like that. But anyway, I think we're here for the XTral Express if you like this type of flare. That's my guess here. Next, moving on. This one's really out there. This is the Helios lens. Now, Helios lenses in real life have like a really specific kind of like bokeh pattern that can happen. So I could probably regenerate this again and it might give us that, or maybe something with trees in the background. Trees out of focus always make a lot of bokeh happen. So this isn't maybe the best use case to look at it, but this is another retro lens. And if you're in real cinematography or you're in AI cinematography, retro lens means we're trying to look for some like funky artifacts, right? So look at the flare. The flare is a little bit different. The blacks are super lifted because it's getting flared. You'll see that again in other examples, but another retro lens. And I think if we had like a tree bokeh example, that the bokeh would be, the out of focus circles bokeh would be a little bit more, have a little bit more of a different pattern to it. But again, it's a retro lens with a different look, and the blacks are lifted, but that's maybe because it was flared, not necessarily because of the lens itself. Moving on, let's look at I never know how to pronounce this lens, the Petzval. So we use this lens in Unreal Engine as well. They just added this. And so what you'll see here, this one's very obvious. This is another retro lens here. But what you'll see is there's this sort of like a spherical aberration happening. It's almost like a warping, kind of circular out of focusness. That is the Petzval look, right? So there are, you could go Google it. There's some like really famous films even recently that were shot with this kind of look. I think it's a little off-putting if you don't have a strong reason for having it. But if you want a scene that has a little bit of like kind of a, like a dreamy state to it, or something that's like a little bit off that people may not exactly notice, but can sort of feel, the Petzval lens has a certain look, and it's, again, kind of a circular out-of-focus look here for this lens. Next up is the Cooke S4. I'm not sure this is the best example of it, but the Cooke is still, even though it is, it's a classic lens, I wouldn't say it's retro, but it's a classic workhorse lens. Depending on your age, the amount of movies shot on 35mm film and the Arri Alexa that are Cooke S4 movies are numerous. I'm just going to make up a number. I'm going to say like 60% of movies were shot on the Cooke S4s. I almost considered buying a set of Cooke S4s in New York City and renting them on consignment. That was like a good business move back in the day. They are workhorse lenses, and back in the day when movies were like absolutely popping, you could own a set of them and you'd never see them again. They would just be rented forever. Now, Cooke generally is maybe a little bit similar to Canon lenses, that they're, as far as their optical design, is they're a little warm, right? And that's a good thing generally when you're filming people's skin. So generally, it's going to be a little bit warmer than what most people would think of as Zeiss lens is a little cooler. Really, I think Zeiss is more like accurate. Cooke is going to give you a little bit more of a warmer look. What does that mean in AI cinematography? Not a ton, because you could just color correct it yourself. I don't see a ton of warmth added over this, but it's a very cool scene in general. But generally, Cooke S4 lenses are warm. They don't have that much distortion or like artifacts, and their flares are pretty not comment worthy. They're trying to suppress flares in real life. So it's kind of it's not really that different to me than an ultra prime in this AI setting. In real life, there's a big difference, but in AI, I don't think there's a huge difference between an S4 and an ultra prime. But of course, they programmed something into this. I don't know what it is, but to me, I can't sense the difference between this and an ultra prime. I don't know. Moving on here, this is not a great example either, but this is the Arri Signature Prime. These are very modern lenses paired well with the Alexa 35 in real life. There's just really sharp, accurate Zeiss lenses, so no color aberration. In real life, you can add flare backs and do like diffusion-y things and stuff to them, but in the AI setting, I don't know the difference between a Signature Prime, a Cooke, and an Ultra Prime. They're all just kind of like classically clean, modernly looking lenses. I can't tell what they would want, what we're doing with this lens. I would also never use it probably. I have a favorite lens. It's not obvious. It's not subtle which one I like. This one I love, let me tell you. So Canon K35s are vintage lenses, and these look like, the image they have is like the rehoused ones. They're usually kind of like little still lenses. I've used the little still lens version of these. These are great, perfect for a backlight like this. This is a really good example, is that when you backlight them, it's considered an aberration. It's considered a bad thing in modern lens design to have light come in and it go crazy in the lens. But some filmmakers really like this look. I am one of those filmmakers. You know, if it's a commercial where it's like, we want to see the product, don't get the lens all, don't have the lens flare and have it look bad. Sure, we don't want that. But if you're trying to evoke a feeling of like this guy being like depressed or like passing out, flares kind of give you that like, oh, there's light in my eyes kind of look. Even though I know a lot of cinematographers like Deakins and other ones don't want anything that calls attention to the filmmaking aspect of it, I like flares and I like that backlight stuff. So anyway, Canon K35 vintage lens, really fun, good backlight stuff. It looks like they cooked with this emulation. I like the K35. I would use these quite a bit. Next is the Laowa macro lens. So this is a probe lens. So on a bit, there's a lot, but so on a big camera, big cinema camera. I actually have one right behind me. There's a Blackmagic camera behind me, but on a big camera body. Let's keep it simple here. Big camera body with a lens. The point of view of that camera is called the entrance pupil. That system, it's both the lens and the camera. Say that it's right in the middle of the camera, right? So it's big. So you can't really move that camera very close to objects. So what you do is you use a probe lens. It's this really long lens with a skinny little tube at the end of it. And then so you have a big camera back here, a little lens, and the lens is all the way out here. The point of view is really far from the body. So you can like put it through like a toaster or like a refrigerator. You can get it into small spaces. That's what that probe lens is for. And I'm not sure if it always has this kind of like lensy vignette thing going on because they don't always have that. But it's a probe lens. It's usually for like really close macros on things or getting like really small point of views. What does that mean here? I'd have to do more generations, but that's what it does in the real world. And here it looks like it put this kind of vignette around it. I'm not positive, but we would need to do more testing, but it's super fun that they have that as an option. Next, we have the Hawk V Lites, which I've shot with these a couple times myself. They are relatively modern anamorphic lenses, right? This is, I think, one of our first anamorphic ones here. We're going to come back to the C Series. And so what you're going to get should be oval bokeh, which this doesn't show, right? So bokeh is normally like a circle on a spherical lens. These ones would be tall ovals. We'll see. But if you wanted to associate anything with a Hawk V Lite, it's sort of the Transformers or J.J. Abrams' Star Trek flare like this. If you've ever seen a flare like that, it's like very transforming right now. In real life, you can use lenses, you can use filters, in post, you can just add them on there, etc. If you want this type of Transformers flare, that's your Hawk V Lites. Go for it. They're fun. Next here is a Lens Baby, which I own a couple of these. There's a bunch of different types of Lens Babies as well, but the one they have here is a tilt shift Lens Baby. So what you generally can do is the focus plane is usually a plane that goes back like flat like this. But with a Lens Baby, what you can do is you can tilt the focus plane like this. So you can have like their chest in focus and something in the background. So it basically changes what's in focus. And here I'm not sure that it's showing it exactly, but it looks like there's like basically hyper shallow focus with this window out of focus here, whereas like normally in some other shots they're not. But this doesn't do the miniature tilt shift look. If you've ever seen like, oh, it's the real world, but it looks like a miniature, what is that? It's usually a tilt shift lens. You can do that in post now as well, or in Unreal Engine just as a post process. But here in AI world, I would say we're basically just getting like really shallow depth of field. That's all I'm really seeing. I don't see like the diagonal plane of focus or whatnot. But you could probably add it in post in like After Effects or something like that. But anyway, that's what a Lens Baby is. And then where are we here? This is the final lens. We went out of order. This is my favorite lens. It's the one I used for my last video. This is the Panavision C Series, a vintage, mostly ever used on film cameras. I mean, there's been some modern digital uses of it, but it's mostly a film camera lens from back in the day. Has a very soft look, very classical. I forget what Star Wars was filmed on, but it's something like this in this era. And what they've added in for us is the classical anamorphic oval bokeh here with the slightly less exaggerated horizontal blue flare similar to the Hawks. But again, we have the oval bokeh and just your kind of classical like Star Wars, like just for me, I just love this look. And if I could film everything on a C Series, I would. And why this is sort of why I kind of like Higgsfield so much is like it's my favorite lens. In Unreal Engine, my work, I've always many times tried to put a Panavision film C Series look onto my digital work with grain and everything. And that's what this is putting together here. So to make a long video even longer, let's keep looking at these examples. I don't expect to making another Higgsfield breakdown video this long, so we'll just get it in one place, skip around if you need to, for sure. So these are some more examples of combinations, and I'm just going to talk about what I'm seeing and what I'm not seeing based on these the settings here. So this is the same prompt again, Arri 16mm camera with Panavision C Series lenses. So first of all, we have the anamorphic flares, the horizontal flares. These are a little softer than the V Lites, I guess. But the bokeh is circular. So it's like a mix of, spherical and anamorphic going on here, but the flares are the anamorphic part, I guess. And the 16 millimeter film camera, again, is a small sensor. The depth of field is shallower, or is less shallow. More things are going to be in focus. But this has a very nice film emulation look on it by default. I think that this is a nice combo, the C Series with the SR. That's why I'm pointing it out. If you look at the transition from light to shadow and you look at how kind of soft that feels, that's sort of where I look for the film look. Also, the shadows are lifted a little bit. Nothing is like really black here. We are getting backlit, so that's partially it. But it has a very soft film finish to it. So if you want a film look, the SR is great. Will the depth of field still be shallow enough to make you happy? I'm not sure, because you can't change the iris on these lenses. That's how you would really be doing this. But I think this has a really nice natural look for AI films generally. Just give it a film look, go to the SR, pretty good. This one I don't like. I don't like it too much. This is the Alexa 35 with the C Series. There's a lot of things at play other than just these sensors. It's how it gets generated in the images and whatnot. So we have the flare that is out of focus. And I guess it's just like a clean look, right? The Alexa 35, we're just not expecting anything like too weird, kind of boring. I'm here for some funny anamorphic stuff generally in Higgsfield. Otherwise, I'd use like, Nano Banana or whatnot. But it's a sterile kind of look with a flare in it. It's okay. It's okay. It's not my favorite. This one I like. So here we are, IMAX, boom, big sensor, film, love it. And like super out of focus background here, where it should be. The bokeh is anamorphic. It's oval bokeh. We have the flares. We have like an interesting flare here. And this is one of my favorite ones in general. But again, like that's why I shot my whole last AI film on this. IMAX C Series. I mean, that's what Matt Workman likes. This is my favorite. Love it. Moving on, Sony Venice C Series. A Sony Venice camera is just going to give you normal digital looking cinema stuff. I think even they made the set cleaner. If you're looking for something like a clean look, clean commercial music video look or something like that, I think this is pretty good. We do have the oval bokeh from the C Series, so GG with a flare. Pretty cool. Now, I wonder if you can generate C Series images that don't have flares, because it does get old after a while. You should use the flares for like effect. But anyway, kind of a clean version of it with the Venice. That's fine. Don't like this one. It's not the camera sensor's fault. I just don't like this generation. But Red V Raptor is sort of like the digital IMAX camera. It's clean. I guess the background's out of focus, and we have the flare. It's not my favorite combo, but it could just be the image in general. I would probably never choose this combo. If I could, I would just shoot film, obviously. We have our last three here. The SR, I like the SR look. The depth of field is maybe not as shallow, but again, this look right there with the blacks not being completely dark, I love it. I like this. I like this shot so much. The depth of field of the console. This is like one of my favorite AI generated images ever. Incredible. And again, the Panavision Series lens with a wider focal length here. So we got the whole console's in view. And I think I generated an orbit shot from this, which the movement is different. I have different expectations for camera movement and where focus stays and how things move like that. But the images anyway, SR, C Series, wide lens, like it. IMAX, C Series, telephoto lens, I like that too. These are my favorite combos for a film look. And we're just testing out some wide stuff. So the 8mm again. So the film, Super 60mm film, C Series anamorphic flares, and then an 8mm. So we get the porthole look. I animated this one. Classic. I like it a lot. I really like the colors that they're doing here. And then our final is IMAX film C Series 8mm. I was like, what's my favorite one look like? Looks like he's in the cockpit of like a fighter jet. I mean, it all just looks like Star Wars kind of to me. It's like Rogue One vibes kind of. Maybe a little bit more like Transformers plus Rogue One or something like that. But again, my favorite combo is going to be IMAX and the SR cameras because they're both film. And then the Panavision C Series or the Canon K35s. And any other focal lengths are completely fine. So that was a much longer video than I was planning to make for this channel. This channel, I've been trying to keep it poppy and light. But if you were interested in sort of like a deep dive in the history of like what do these cameras mean, what do these lenses mean, and just kind of appreciate, I think, how much thought Higgsfield has put into this. They obviously consulted with real-world cinematographers because, I mean, these are tools that I really love and wish and aspire to use. So using them in a virtual sense is like they're just feeding me dopamine with these words and making images. They got me. That's all I got to say. They got me. I don't know anyone at Higgsfield yet. And they have not paid me anything yet, but I just tell you, I really like making anamorphic images. I've made them in Maya, Cinema 4D, Unreal Engine, in real life, and now I'm making them in AI. And you know what? This AI filmmaking, cinematography, image making, it's for me, and maybe it's for you too. So that wraps it up for this video. If any of the like hardcore cinematography, VFX, virtual production find me on my AI channel here, like, I get it. This is for fun. They're just trying to give you ways of describing the image you want without having to use text, which text just gets a little bit like kind of annoying over time, right? So having graphics, having things that you can memorize visually, things that you can recall from your real world work, I really appreciate this workflow. And although text to image is really powerful, it's not my preferred workflow. I don't really love prompting. If there was a more pick the visual frame you like and pick the movement and pick the camera, I love what they've done to the visual interface of Higgsfield, and I hope that more AI stuff goes in this direction because I'm a visual person. I don't like typing text. I would rather have almost everything be some sort of visual block that I could put together and then it generates the image. I could like sketch a picture of the person's face in a stick figure and it does it. I'd much rather do that. I'm way more visual than I am like text type. Anyway, super long video. There's Higgsfield Cinema Studio. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and I'll check you on the next video.